The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March of 1878, carried by a dusty stagecoach that rattled into Skidoo, California, with the kind of determination only desperation could fuel. Kade Fletcher stood on the porch of his modest ranch house, squinting against the harsh desert sun as the postal rider approached, and when those calloused fingers touched the envelope, he had no idea his entire world was about to shift on its axis. "Mail-order bride correspondence for Fletcher," the rider announced, tipping his hat before spurring his horse back toward town. Kade broke the seal with trembling hands. He had written to the matrimonial agency in San Francisco 6 weeks prior, during one of those long, lonely nights when the silence of his ranch pressed against him like a physical weight. At 26 years old, he had built something worthwhile out here in the Inyo County desert, carving a life from the unforgiving land with his own 2 hands. But success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with, no voice to break the monotony of wind and cattle lowing in the distance. The letter was written in careful, measured script, clearly penned by someone other than the woman it represented. "Dear Mr. Fletcher," it began, "my name is Sarah Fairmont, and I am writing in response to your advertisement for a wife. I must be forthright with you from the beginning, as honesty is the foundation upon which any marriage must be built. I am 23 years old, educated and capable of managing a household. However, I am also blind. I lost my sight to scarlet fever when I was 7 years old. If this fact dissuades you from further correspondence, I will understand completely and harbor no ill will. But if you are willing to accept me as I am, I promise to be a faithful, hard-working wife who will make your house a home." The letter went on, detailing her current situation living with her elderly aunt in San Francisco, her skills in cooking, sewing, and keeping house despite her disability, and her desire for a fresh start away from the pitying glances and limited opportunities the city offered a blind woman. She wrote with a dignity that impressed Kade, a quiet strength that radiated through the carefully chosen words. He read the letter 3 times, standing there on his porch as the afternoon heat built around him. The revelation about her blindness had caught him off guard, certainly, but as he considered it, an unexpected feeling settled in his chest. Not pity, but something else. A sense that perhaps this woman understood what it meant to be seen differently, to be judged on circumstances beyond one's control. Kade himself bore scars across his back from a childhood spent with a brutal father, marks he kept hidden beneath his shirts, shame he kept buried beneath hard work and forced smiles when he rode into town. That evening, he sat at his rough-hewn table and penned a response by lamplight. His handwriting was crude compared to the elegant script of Sarah's letter, but the words came from somewhere deep and true. "Miss Fairmont, your honesty is a gift, not a burden. I accept you exactly as you are. If you will have me, I will send money for your passage to Skidoo. I cannot promise you luxury, but I can promise you respect, protection, and a home where you will never be judged for things beyond your control. Yours, Kade Fletcher." The exchange of letters that followed over the next month revealed more about each other than Kade had ever shared with another living soul. Sarah wrote about her childhood before the fever, memories of color and light that remained vivid in her mind even after 16 years of darkness. She wrote about her parents, both deceased, and the aunt who cared for her out of duty rather than love. She wrote about her dreams of having a family, children to love without reservation. Kade found himself writing back about his own childhood in Missouri, the father who drank and raged, the mother who died trying to protect him when he was 12. He wrote about heading west as soon as he was old enough, about the years of working other men's ranches, until he had saved enough to buy his own land here in the desert. He wrote about the loneliness that crept in after the sun went down, about wanting someone to build a life with, to create something better than what he had known. "I think we both understand what it means to survive," Sarah wrote in her final letter before the journey. "Now perhaps we can learn what it means to truly live." The day Sarah was scheduled to arrive, Kade rode into Skidoo before dawn. The town was little more than a collection of weathered buildings clustered along the main road, a mining settlement that had sprung up in the desert wilderness like a stubborn weed. He had bathed in the creek the night before, put on his cleanest shirt, even attempted to tame his sun-bleached hair with water and determination. His hands shook as he waited outside the stage office, a nervousness he had never experienced even when facing down an angry bull or a desert rattlesnake. The stage rolled in just after noon, wheels kicking up clouds of dust that hung in the still air. Kade's heart hammered against his ribs as the driver climbed down and opened the passenger door. A gloved hand emerged first, pale against the dark wood, and then Sarah herself stepped down onto the dusty street of Skidoo. She wore a simple gray traveling dress, and her hair, the color of honey in sunlight, was pinned neatly beneath a modest bonnet. But it was her face that stopped Kade's breath in his chest, not because of any particular beauty or flaw, but because of the way she held herself, chin lifted with quiet dignity, despite the obvious uncertainty of standing in a strange place, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds and smells. Her eyes, a pale blue that seemed to look through rather than at the world, moved as if searching, though Kade knew from her letters that she saw nothing but shadows and light. "Miss Fairmont." His voice came out rougher than intended. Her head turned toward the sound, and a small, genuine smile curved her lips. "Mr. Fletcher, I recognize your voice from my imagination, though I confess you sound taller than I pictured." The unexpected humor broke the tension, and Kade found himself smiling. "I am rather tall, I suppose." 6'3", if that helps your imagination any. "It does indeed." She extended her hand, not quite in his direction, and he stepped forward to take it. Her grip was firm, confident despite her disability. "I am grateful for your letters." They made this journey feel less like leaping into an abyss and more like walking toward something hopeful. "I felt the same," Kade admitted. He glanced at the stage driver, who was unloading a modest trunk and a smaller bag. "Let me get your belongings. I have a wagon just there." "The ranch is about an hour's ride from town." "I will need your arm, if you do not mind. New places require a bit more guidance until I can build a map in my mind." Kade offered his arm, feeling the light pressure of her hand as she accepted it. He guided her to the wagon, describing the step up, the position of the seat. She moved with practiced grace, her other hand reaching out to confirm what he described before she settled herself. As Kade loaded her trunk and climbed up beside her, he noticed several townspeople watching with undisguised curiosity. Old Mrs. Henderson stood outside the general store, whispering to her daughter. 3 miners loitering near the saloon nudged each other, their gazes fixed on Sarah with expressions Kade could not quite read. "What is it?" Sarah asked quietly. "I can feel a tension like heat on my skin. Are they staring?" "They are," Kade said honestly, remembering her value for truth. "Small towns like this, strangers are always notable, and you are quite a bit prettier than the usual travelers through Skidoo." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "You are kind to say so." "I am honest to say so." He picked up the reins, clicking his tongue to set the horses moving. As they rolled out of town toward the open desert, Kade began to describe what surrounded them. "We are heading east now, toward the mountains. The land here is mostly scrub brush and rocky soil, but there are places where it surprises you with beauty. My ranch sits near a creek that flows year-round, fed by snowmelt from the higher elevations. Tell me about the colors, Sarah said softly. I still remember them, but I love to hear how others see the world. So Kade talked, finding words for things he had never thought to describe before. He spoke of the way the desert turned gold in the late afternoon sun, how the mountains in the distance shifted from brown to purple as evening approached. He described the particular blue of the California sky, so different from the heavier skies of his Missouri childhood. He talked about the silvery green of sage, the shocking red of Indian paintbrush when it bloomed in spring. Sarah listened with complete attention, her face turned toward his voice, occasionally asking questions that revealed how carefully she was constructing the landscape in her mind. "And your house, what does it look like?" "Modest," Kade admitted. "Wood frame, 2 rooms right now, though I have been meaning to add on. There is a porch that faces west, good for sitting in the evenings when the heat breaks. The barn is larger than the house, truth be told. I have about 30 head of cattle, 6 horses, chickens, a milk cow." "It sounds wonderful," Sarah said, and there was no false enthusiasm in her voice, only genuine warmth. "A home." Something in the way she said that word, home, made Kade's chest tighten. He glanced at her profile, the way the desert wind had tugged a few strands of hair loose from her bonnet, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. She had trusted him enough to make this journey, to put her life in his hands. He would not fail her. The ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Kade described the layout as they approached, the position of the buildings, the corral where the horses stood watching their arrival with pricked ears. "We will be married tomorrow," Kade said as he helped Sarah down from the wagon. "The circuit preacher is due through Skidoo. I sent word when your last letter arrived, but if you need more time, if you have changed your mind." "I have not changed my mind." Sarah's hand found his arm again, steady and sure. "I made this choice with my eyes open, in a manner of speaking. Tomorrow will be fine." That night, Sarah slept in Kade's bedroom while he bedded down in the barn, propriety maintained until the vows could be spoken. But before they parted, he gave her a careful tour of the house, describing each piece of furniture, guiding her hand so she could learn the layout. She moved slowly, methodically, her fingers trailing along walls and tabletops, building that mental map she had mentioned. "You are a good teacher," she said when they had made a complete circuit. "Some people grab my hand and drag me along like a stubborn mule. You give me time to understand the space." "You are not a burden to be hurried," Kade said simply. "You are a person learning a new place. That takes time for anyone." In the lamplight, Sarah's expression softened. "I think I am very fortunate in my choice of husband, Mr. Fletcher." "Kade," he corrected gently. "We will be married tomorrow. You should call me Kade." "Kade," she repeated, testing the name. "And you must call me Sarah." That night in the barn, lying on a bedroll with the familiar sounds of horses and the smell of hay around him, Kade stared up at the dark beams overhead and wondered at the turn his life had taken. In all his imaginings about marriage, he had pictured a wife who would cook and clean, someone to share the work and perhaps, eventually, the warmth of a bed. He had not expected this feeling that had begun to unfurl in his chest, this protectiveness mixed with something deeper, a desire to know every part of Sarah's mind and heart. He thought about the way she had smiled when she stepped off the stage, the courage it must have taken to travel alone across California to marry a stranger. He thought about her hands learning the shape of his house, the careful attention she paid to every detail he described. And he realized that somewhere in the exchange of those letters, in the honesty they had shared across the miles, something had begun to grow. Something that might, with care and time, become love. The wedding took place the next afternoon in the small church at the edge of Skidoo. The circuit preacher, a weathered man named Reverend Thompson, performed the ceremony with brisk efficiency. Kade had asked Tom Wilson, who owned the neighboring ranch, to stand as witness, along with Tom's wife Martha. Sarah wore the same gray dress from the day before, but she had woven a few wildflowers Kade had picked that morning into her hair. He had described them to her carefully, the purple of desert lupine, the white of evening primrose, and she had smiled at the gesture. "Do you, Kade Fletcher, take Sarah Fairmont to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady, sure. "And do you, Sarah Fairmont, take Kade Fletcher to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Her hand in his trembled slightly, but her voice rang clear. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Kade hesitated. They had not kissed before, had barely touched beyond the necessary guidance. But Sarah turned her face up toward him with absolute trust, and he leaned down, pressing his lips to hers in a gentle, chaste kiss that somehow felt more intimate than anything he had experienced. When they parted, Sarah was smiling, a faint blush on her cheeks. "Hello, husband. Hello, wife." Martha Wilson insisted they come back to the Wilson Ranch for a wedding supper, an offer Kade accepted gratefully, as his own cooking skills were rudimentary at best. Over roasted chicken and vegetables from Martha's garden, the conversation flowed easily. Martha was a kind woman, a few years older than Sarah, and she seemed genuinely pleased to have another woman in the area. "It gets lonely out here," Martha confided as the men talked cattle prices. "Tom is wonderful, but sometimes a woman needs another woman to talk to. You must come visit, Sarah." "I can send Tom to fetch you whenever you like." "I would like that very much," Sarah said warmly. "Though I hope to learn the route well enough eventually to manage it myself. I may not see, but I am not helpless." "Of course not," Martha agreed quickly, though Kade could hear the uncertainty in her voice. It was a tone he had already become familiar with, the way people spoke to Sarah with a mixture of admiration and doubt, unsure how much she was truly capable of. The ride back to the ranch in the darkness felt different than the journey from town the day before. Sarah sat close to him on the wagon seat, her shoulder pressed against his, her hand resting lightly on his knee. They were married now, bound together by law and by choice. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked quietly as the ranch house came into view, a dark shape against the star-filled sky. "Some," Kade admitted. "I want to be a good husband to you, Sarah. I want you to be happy here. Then we are matched in our desires because I want to be a good wife." She paused, then added, "I know there are expectations on a wedding night. I am prepared to fulfill them, though I confess I am nervous myself." Kade pulled the wagon to a stop near the house and set the brake. He turned to face Sarah, though he knew she could not see his expression. "We have the rest of our lives together. There is no need to rush anything that makes either of us uncomfortable. We are partners first, Sarah. Everything else can come in its own time." The relief in her exhale was palpable. "Thank you. I think perhaps we should learn to be friends before we are anything else. I think that is the wisest thing I have heard in a long while." That night, they shared the bedroom but kept a respectful distance, both fully clothed beneath the quilts. Kade lay awake long after Sarah's breathing had evened into sleep, thinking about the promise he had made. Partners first. It was not the usual order of things, but nothing about their situation was usual, and perhaps, he thought, that was exactly why it might work. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Kade rose before dawn to tend the animals and returned to find Sarah already awake, navigating the kitchen with increasing confidence. Her cooking skills were exceptional, far better than his own rough attempts had ever been. She explained as she worked, describing how she organized ingredients, how she used touch and smell and the sound of sizzling to judge when something was done. "My aunt thought cooking was too dangerous for me," Sarah said one morning as she flipped flapjacks on the griddle with easy precision. "She insisted on doing everything herself, but I convinced the cook to teach me in secret. If I was going to survive in this world, I needed to be capable." "You are more than capable," Kade said, watching her work with undisguised admiration. "You are remarkable." She smiled at that, a pleased expression that made something warm unfold in his chest. Over breakfast, they talked about the day ahead. Kade was planning to ride out to check on the cattle in the southern pasture, a task that would take most of the day. "I will work on the garden," Sarah said. "You mentioned there was a plot behind the house that has gone to weeds. I may not be able to see them, but I can certainly feel the difference between a weed and a vegetable plant. And I can hear you thinking I might hurt myself, Kade Fletcher. Stop it." He laughed, startled by her directness. "Am I that obvious? Your silences speak volumes. I appreciate your concern, but I need to contribute. I need to feel useful." "You are useful," Kade protested. "This house already feels more like a home than it has in the 3 years I have lived here." "Thank you for saying so." "But still, I will work on the garden." Kade left her with some reluctance, though he tried to hide it. As he rode out across his land, checking fences and counting heads, his mind kept drifting back to the house. He imagined Sarah kneeling in the garden dirt, her capable hands sorting through the overgrown plot. He had never been the worrying type, but the thought of her alone, vulnerable to anything from a rattlesnake to a stumble over unseen ground, made his chest tight with anxiety. When he returned as the sun was setting, he found Sarah sitting on the porch steps, her hands dirt-stained but her expression triumphant. "Come see what I have accomplished," she said, rising as she heard his horse approach. The garden plot was transformed. She had cleared a section about 10 feet square, pulling weeds and turning soil. More impressively, she had somehow identified and preserved the struggling tomato plants and bean stalks that Kade had planted months ago and then neglected. "How did you know which were weeds and which were vegetables?" he asked, genuinely curious. "The vegetables grow in rows evenly spaced. Weeds grow wild. I felt the pattern." She demonstrated, running her hand just above the soil. "And the leaves feel different. Tomato leaves have a particular texture, a smell. Beans climb so they have tendrils. It is all there if you pay attention." That night over dinner, Kade found himself telling Sarah things he had never spoken aloud, about his plans for the ranch, his dream of building it into something substantial, about the loneliness of the past few years, the way silence could become oppressive. Sarah listened with that complete attention he was coming to cherish, asking questions that showed she was truly interested, truly engaged. "What about you?" Kade asked. "What are your dreams, Sarah?" She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. "I dream of having children, of creating a family built on love instead of obligation. I dream of being seen as more than my blindness, of having a purpose beyond being someone's burden." She paused, then added softly, "I dream of being loved, truly loved, by someone who knows all of me." "You are not a burden," Kade said fiercely. "Not to me, not ever." Sarah's smile was sad and sweet at once. "You are kind, Kade, but we have known each other only a few days. Give it time before you make such declarations. Time will only prove me right." As the weeks passed, Kade discovered the truth in his own words. Sarah's presence transformed everything. The house stayed cleaner, the meals were more varied and delicious, the garden began to flourish under her patient care. But it was more than the practical contributions. It was the sound of her humming as she worked, the way she laughed when he described the antics of the chickens, the evening conversations on the porch as the desert cooled and the stars emerged. He learned the nuances of guiding her, the way to describe terrain when they walked together, how to position his arm so she could read his movements. He learned that she had a wicked sense of humor, that she could navigate by memory with stunning accuracy once she had walked a route a few times, that she loved the feel of wind on her face and would stand in the breeze with her eyes closed and a smile on her lips. Sarah, in turn, learned the rhythms of the ranch, the sounds that meant different things. She could identify each horse by the particular sound of its hoofbeats, could tell when the cattle were restless, could judge the time of day by the position of the sun's warmth on her skin. She began taking on more tasks, insisting that she was perfectly capable of feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, even milking the cow once Kade had shown her the process. "You are going to work yourself into exhaustion," Kade protested one evening, finding her kneading bread dough after a full day of housework and garden tending. "I am happy," Sarah said simply. "For the first time in years, I feel like I have a purpose. Let me have this, Kade." How could he argue with that? So he sat at the table and watched her work, the capable movements of her hands, the concentration on her face, and felt something shift deeper in his chest. Affection was growing into something more profound, something that made his heart race when she smiled, that made him long to reach out and touch her hair, her face, to pull her close and confess feelings he barely understood himself. One morning in early May, about 6 weeks after Sarah's arrival, Kade was working in the barn when he heard her scream. The sound shot through him like lightning, and he ran toward the house with his heart in his throat, bursting through the door to find Sarah standing in the kitchen, her hand pressed to her mouth. "What is it? What happened? Are you hurt?" He was at her side in an instant, his hands on her shoulders checking for injury. "I am fine," she gasped, then started to laugh, a sound edged with hysteria. "I am so sorry, I did not mean to frighten you. I saw a mouse." "I know it is ridiculous. I am a grown woman, but it startled me and I screamed before I could stop myself." The relief was so intense that Kade's knees went weak. He pulled Sarah into his arms without thinking, holding her close as his racing heart began to slow. "Do not apologize. You scared 10 years off my life, but do not apologize." Sarah's arms came around him tentatively, then tightened. They stood like that for a long moment, longer than the situation warranted, and when they finally separated, both seemed reluctant to let go. "I will set traps," Kade said, his voice rougher than usual. "We cannot have mice frightening my wife." "Your wife," Sarah repeated softly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that I have a home, a husband, that I am not alone anymore." "You will never be alone again," Kade promised. "I swear it." That afternoon, Martha Wilson came to visit, driven over by her husband Tom. The two women spent hours together while the men talked business, and when it was time for the Wilsons to leave, Sarah's face was brighter than Kade had yet seen it. "Martha is teaching me to can vegetables," Sarah announced that evening. "She says her mother taught her and she wants to pass the knowledge on. Is that all right? She invited me to come once a week. Of course it is all right. I am glad you are making a friend." "She also told me something interesting." Sarah's tone turned mischievous. "Apparently the whole town is gossiping about us. They expected you to send me back when you discovered I was blind. Some even had wagers on how long I would last." Kade felt anger rise hot in his chest. "That is cruel." "Perhaps, but Martha says you have surprised them all. She says you look at me like I hung the moon, and it has confounded the gossips thoroughly." "Well, I do think you hung the moon," Kade said without thinking, "or at least polished it up considerably." The blush that colored Sarah's cheeks made his chest tight. They were growing closer, he could feel it, but there was still a distance between them, a careful respect for boundaries that neither seemed ready to cross. They still slept in the same bed but on opposite sides, still touched only when necessary for guidance or in moments of comfort. Kade wanted more, wanted to kiss her properly, to hold her through the night, to make her truly his wife in every sense. But he was terrified of pushing too hard, of making her feel obligated. The decision was taken from his hands on a night in late May. A storm rolled in from the west, one of the sudden violent thunderstorms that occasionally broke the desert's monotony. The rain came in sheets, lightning splitting the sky, thunder shaking the house's frame. Kade woke to find Sarah pressed against him, trembling. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I know I am being foolish, but I cannot see the lightning to prepare for the thunder, and it startles me every time." "You are not being foolish." Kade shifted, pulling her closer, letting her burrow into his chest. "I have you. You are safe." They lay like that as the storm raged outside, Sarah's trembling gradually subsiding as she relaxed into his warmth. Kade stroked her hair, murmuring reassurances, and felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. This was what he had been missing, this intimacy, this trust. When the storm finally passed and silence returned, Sarah did not move away. Instead, she tilted her face up toward his, her unseeing eyes somehow finding his in the darkness. "Kade," she whispered, "I know we agreed to be partners first, friends, but I find that I want more. If you do not feel the same, please tell me now and we can forget I spoke. But if you do—" He answered by kissing her, a kiss nothing like the chaste press of lips at their wedding. This was deep and searching, a question and an answer all at once. Sarah responded with equal passion, her hands coming up to frame his face, her lips parting under his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted this for weeks, wanted you, but I did not want to push, did not want you to feel obligated. I feel many things for you, Kade Fletcher, but obligation is not among them." Her voice was low, fervent. "I think I am falling in love with you." The words hit him like a physical blow, joy so intense it was almost painful. "I am already in love with you," he confessed. "I think I have been since I read your first letter. When you wrote about wanting to live instead of just survive, I felt like you saw straight into my soul. Then we are matched in this too." Sarah kissed him again, softer this time, tender. "Make me your wife in truth, Kade. I am ready." That night, they crossed the final boundary between them, coming together with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes. Kade had been with women before, hurried encounters that meant nothing, but this was different. This was Sarah, his wife, the woman he loved, and every touch, every kiss, every whispered word was a vow more binding than the one spoken in church. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Sarah's head on Kade's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I never thought I could be this happy," Sarah whispered into the darkness. "I spent so many years believing I was meant to be alone, that no one would want a blind wife. But you see me, Kade, you truly see me." "I see you," he agreed, the irony of the words not lost on either of them. "I see your strength, your humor, your courage. I see the way you have transformed this house into a home, the way you face each challenge with determination. I see the woman I love." "Tell me what I look like," Sarah said suddenly. "I know it should not matter, but I am curious. I have not seen my own face in 16 years. Kade propped himself up on one elbow, though he knew she could not see him studying her features in the moonlight streaming through the window. "You have hair the color of honey in sunlight," he began. "It is thick and soft, and when you wear it down, it falls past your shoulders in waves. Your eyes are blue, pale like the sky just after dawn. Your face is heart-shaped, with high cheekbones and a small, straight nose. You have a mouth made for smiling, and when you do smile, truly smile, it transforms your whole face into something radiant. Am I beautiful? The question was asked with genuine curiosity, no vanity. You are to me, Kade said honestly. But more than that, you are real. You are Sarah, and that is infinitely better than beautiful. She reached up, her fingers finding his face, tracing his features with the careful attention she brought to everything. And you, I have imagined, but I would like to know. I am nothing special, Kade said, uncomfortable with the attention. Tall, as you know. Hair that is more blonde than brown, usually too long because I cannot be bothered to cut it properly. Eyes that my mother used to say were green like new leaves, though I always thought that was just something mothers say. A nose that was broken when I was 15 and did not set quite right. A scar through my left eyebrow from a childhood fall. Sarah's fingers confirmed each feature as he described it, mapping his face with patient thoroughness. You are beautiful to me, she said, echoing his words. And you are Kade, which is infinitely better than beautiful. They made love again as the first light of dawn began to color the sky, slow and sweet, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and what brought joy. And when they finally rose to face the day, everything had changed. They moved around each other with new ease, touches lingering, smiles secret and shared. The summer months passed in a golden haze of happiness. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Kade's herd grew, and he hired a young man named Billy to help with the heavier work, freeing up more time to spend with Sarah. The garden exploded with produce under Sarah's patient care, and she spent many afternoons with Martha learning to preserve the bounty for winter. Sarah's navigation of the ranch improved until she could move from house to barn to chicken coop with barely any hesitation, her mental map detailed and accurate. She began taking on more of the animal care, insisting that she was perfectly capable of feeding horses and turning them out to pasture. You should have seen the look on Tom Wilson's face when he rode over and found me mucking out stalls, Sarah told Kade one evening, laughing at the memory. He practically fell off his horse in shock. Then he offered to do it for me, as if I was some delicate flower that might wilt at the smell of manure. What did you tell him? That I appreciated his kindness, but that I was a rancher's wife, and ranchers' wives do not wilt. Her grin was fierce, proud. He watched me finish, then rode away shaking his head. I believe he went straight to town to report this development to the gossips. Kade pulled her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. You are going to give the whole town something to talk about. Good. Let them talk. I spent too many years being hidden away, being told what I could and could not do. I will not live that way anymore. In August, Sarah missed her monthly courses. She said nothing for a week, waiting to be sure, but when the second week passed and the telltale signs continued, she told Kade over breakfast. I believe I am with child. Kade's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, his hands suddenly trembling. Are you certain? As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. My courses are never late and I have been feeling ill in the mornings. Martha told me once that was a common sign. 1,000 emotions flooded through Kade at once. Joy, fear, wonder, terror. How do you feel about it? Terrified, Sarah admitted. And thrilled, and worried. I want this child, Kade, but I do not know how I will manage being blind. What if I cannot care for it properly? What if I hurt the baby somehow? Kade was around the table in an instant, kneeling beside her chair, taking her hands in his. You will be a wonderful mother. You are the strongest, most capable person I have ever known, and you will not be alone. I will be here every step of the way. You are not frightened. I am terrified, he echoed her words. I never knew my father could be a good man, only that he was cruel. I do not know how to be a father, but I know I will love this child the way I love you with everything I have, and we will learn together." Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "We will learn together," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." They rode into Skidoo the next week to see Dr. Harrison, an older man who had set up practice in town the year before. He examined Sarah with professional detachment, asked a series of questions, and confirmed what they already suspected. "You are indeed expecting, Mrs. Fletcher. I would estimate the baby will arrive sometime in early March, based on what you have told me." He paused, his expression turning serious. "I must ask, are you prepared for the challenges of motherhood given your condition?" Kade felt Sarah stiffen beside him, felt his own anger rising at the implied judgment. But before he could speak, Sarah answered with icy dignity. "Dr. Harrison, I have been preparing for the challenges of life with my blindness for 16 years. I learned to cook on a hot stove without burning myself, to navigate unfamiliar spaces without assistance, to manage a household and a garden and even muck out horse stalls. I assure you, I will learn to care for a child with the same determination. But I appreciate your concern." The doctor had the grace to look embarrassed. "Of course, Mrs. Fletcher, I meant no offense. I simply wanted to ensure you were aware of the difficulties." "I am always aware of difficulties, doctor. It is the nature of my existence. But I am also aware of my capabilities, which are considerable." As they left the doctor's office, Kade squeezed Sarah's hand. "You were magnificent." "I was angry," Sarah corrected. "I am so tired of people assuming I am helpless. But I suppose I should grow accustomed to it. Everyone will question whether a blind woman can raise a child. Let them question. You will prove them all wrong." But proving them wrong became more complicated as the pregnancy progressed. Sarah's morning sickness was severe, leaving her weak and dizzy. The changes in her body affected her balance, making navigation more difficult. She grew frustrated with her limitations, angry at her own body for betraying her. "I cannot even walk to the chicken coop without feeling like I might fall," she said one October afternoon, her voice thick with tears. "How am I supposed to care for a baby if I cannot trust my own feet?" Kade held her as she cried, helpless in the face of her frustration. "This will pass. Dr. Harrison said the sickness usually eases after a few months, and your balance will adjust. You are strong, Sarah. You will get through this." "What if I do not? What if I cannot do this?" "Then we will find a way together. I am here, Sarah. I am not going anywhere." Slowly, painfully, Sarah's body did adjust. The morning sickness faded as she entered the 4th month of pregnancy, and her balance improved as she learned to account for her changing center of gravity. Martha Wilson proved to be a godsend, visiting regularly to share advice from her own 3 pregnancies, treating Sarah's blindness as an inconvenience to work around rather than an insurmountable obstacle. "You will need to prepare things in advance," Martha suggested in November as they sat together working on baby clothes. "Have everything you need within easy reach, organized in a way you can navigate by touch. My mother was nearly blind in her later years, and she managed her grandchildren beautifully once she had a system." Sarah seized on this advice, spending the winter months preparing. She and Kade converted a corner of the bedroom into a nursery space, and Sarah organized it with meticulous care. Every item had a specific place that she memorized. Every supply was stored in a container she could identify by touch. She practiced diapering using a rolled towel, practiced holding positions with a sack of flour, practiced until her movements were confident and sure. Kade watched her preparations with a mixture of awe and love. She approached motherhood the way she approached everything, with fierce determination and practical intelligence. When doubt crept in during the dark hours of night, when she would wake crying that she was going to fail, he held her and reminded her of all she had already overcome. "You left everything familiar to marry a stranger in the desert," he would say. "You learned to navigate a ranch you had never seen, to care for animals and grow a garden and run a household. You have already done impossible things, Sarah. This is just one more." Winter in the California desert was mild, but the nights grew cold. Kade spent them curled around Sarah's growing belly, his hand resting on the swell where their child grew. He talked to the baby, describing the ranch that would be its home, the life they would build together. Sarah would laugh and tell him the baby could not possibly understand, but she never asked him to stop. In February, as Sarah's time drew near, Kade found himself gripped by a fear he could not shake. Childbirth was dangerous under the best circumstances, and Sarah's blindness added complications he did not fully understand. What if something went wrong? What if he lost her? "You are worrying again," Sarah said one evening, her hand finding his in the darkness. "I can feel it like a storm building." "I am terrified of losing you," Kade admitted. "Women die in childbirth, Sarah. It happens every day. And if something were to go wrong, if you could not tell us what was happening because you could not see—" "Then you will have to trust me to know my own body," Sarah interrupted gently. "I cannot see, Kade, but I am more attuned to my physical self than most people. I will know if something is wrong, and Dr. Harrison will be here, and Martha has promised to assist. We have done everything we can to prepare. I cannot lose you, I only just found you. You will not lose me. I am strong, remember? You tell me so all the time. Have faith in your own words." On March 7, 1879, Sarah woke Kade in the pre-dawn darkness with a hand on his shoulder. "The baby is coming. The pain started an hour ago." Kade was out of bed in an instant, his heart racing. "Why did you not wake me sooner?" "Because you needed rest, and there was nothing to be done yet. But they are getting closer now. You should ride for Dr. Harrison and Martha." The next hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Kade rode to town at a gallop, returning with Dr. Harrison just as the sun was rising. Martha Wilson arrived shortly after, bustling into the bedroom with the confidence of experience. Kade was banished to the main room while the women worked, left to pace and worry and pray to a God he was not sure he believed in. The sounds from the bedroom were terrible, Sarah's cries of pain cutting through him like knives. He wanted to go to her, but Martha had been firm that he would only be in the way. It was Billy, the ranch hand, who finally forced him to sit down. "You are wearing a trench in the floor, boss. The missus is strong, she will be fine. You do not know that. I know she survived traveling alone across California while blind. I know she learned this ranch like she was born to it. I know she faces down every challenge that comes her way. Woman like that does not give up easy." The hours crawled by. Noon came and went. The sounds from the bedroom changed, grew more urgent. Dr. Harrison emerged once, his sleeves rolled up, his expression serious. "How is she?" Kade demanded. "Laboring hard. It is her first child, these things take time. But she is strong, Mr. Fletcher. She is doing well." It was nearly sunset when Kade heard the sound that stopped his heart, a baby's thin, wavering cry. He was on his feet, his hands shaking, his entire body trembling with relief and terror and hope. Martha emerged moments later, a smile on her tired face. "You have a son, Mr. Fletcher. A healthy, strong boy, and your wife is tired but well. You can go in now." Kade practically ran to the bedroom. Sarah lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant. And in her arms, wrapped in a quilt Martha had made, was a tiny bundle from which protruded a red, wrinkled face. "Kade," Sarah whispered, her face turning toward the sound of his footsteps. "Come meet your son." He crossed to the bed on shaking legs, lowering himself carefully to sit beside her. The baby was impossibly small, impossibly perfect, with a shock of dark hair and miniature fists waving in the air. "He is beautiful," Kade breathed. "Sarah, he is perfect." "Describe him to me," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Tell me what he looks like." Kade looked at his son, this tiny miracle, and tried to find words adequate to the task. "He has dark hair, nearly black, thick already. His eyes are blue, though Dr. Harrison says they might change color. His face is round, his cheeks full. He has your nose, delicate and straight. And his hands, Sarah. They are so small but perfect, 10 tiny fingers that grip like he is already determined to hold on to life." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she held their son, her hands learning his features with that same patient attention she brought to everything. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mother. I cannot see you with my eyes, but I see you with my heart, and you are the most beautiful thing in the world." Kade put his arm around Sarah, pulling her and the baby close, this family he had never dared dream he could have. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never settled on one. Now Sarah smiled, her unseeing eyes somehow finding Kade's. "I would like to name him after you, Kade Fletcher, Jr. Are you certain? I thought you wanted something more original." "You are the best man I know, Kade. I can think of no better name for our son than yours." So Kade Fletcher, Jr. entered the world, and with him, a new chapter in their lives. The first weeks were exhausting, a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. But Sarah rose to the challenge with the same determination she brought to everything else. She learned the sound of her son's different cries, could tell hunger from discomfort, from tiredness with unerring accuracy. She kept him close, day and night, learning his rhythms, his needs, his personality. Kade watched in awe as Sarah navigated motherhood. She had been right. Her heightened senses compensated for her lack of sight in ways he had not fully appreciated. She could tell if the baby was too warm or too cold with a touch, could judge his mood by the quality of his breathing, could anticipate his needs before he even began to fuss. "How do you do it?" he asked one night as she rocked their son back to sleep with practiced ease. "You make it look effortless." "It is far from effortless," Sarah said with a tired smile. "But I love him so much, Kade. I never knew I could feel this way, like my heart is walking around outside my body. It makes the exhaustion bearable." As spring turned to summer, young Kade grew and thrived. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, fascinated by sounds and textures. Sarah would spend hours with him, describing the world, letting him feel different objects, singing songs her own mother had sung to her before the fever took her sight. The townspeople's skepticism gradually transformed into grudging respect as word spread of how well Sarah managed. Dr. Harrison stopped by one afternoon in May, ostensibly to check on the baby's progress, but Kade suspected he had another purpose. "Mrs. Fletcher," the doctor said after examining young Kade and declaring him perfectly healthy, "I owe you an apology. When you came to me last year, I doubted your ability to care for a child. I was wrong. Your son is thriving, clearly well loved and well cared for. You are a remarkable mother." Sarah accepted the apology with grace. "Thank you, doctor. I hope perhaps my example might change how you view other patients with disabilities. We are often far more capable than we are given credit for." "A lesson I will take to heart," Dr. Harrison promised. As summer progressed, Kade began to plan for the future. The ranch was doing well enough to support expansion, and he hired 2 more hands to help manage the growing herd. He also began building an addition to the house, 2 more rooms that would give them space to grow. "Are you planning for more children?" Sarah teased when she realized the scope of the construction. "I am planning for possibilities," Kade corrected, "and hoping that you might be amenable to filling those rooms eventually." "I think I might be," Sarah said, her smile warm. "Though perhaps we should wait until young Kade is a bit older. I am not certain I have the energy for two just yet." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered, young Kade grew, and the love between Kade and Sarah deepened into something profound and unshakable. They faced challenges, certainly. There were difficult moments when Sarah's blindness complicated things, when Cade's past demons crept in to haunt him, when money was tight or the weather turned harsh. But they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense. On their second wedding anniversary, Kade gave Sarah a gift he had been planning for months. He had hired a craftsman in town to create a detailed model of the ranch, small enough to sit on a table but accurate in every detail. Every building, every fence line, every major feature was represented in miniature. "It is for you," Kade explained as Sarah's hands explored the model with delight. "So you can see the ranch as I see it. Feel where the barn sits in relation to the house, where the creek runs, where the pastures spread out." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as her fingers traced the layout, building the visual picture in her mind. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. Thank you, Kade." "You have given me everything, Sarah. A home, a son, a reason to wake up every morning with joy instead of just duty. This is the least I can do." That night, after young Kade was asleep, they made love with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes. And 3 months later, Sarah joyfully announced that she was pregnant again. The second pregnancy was easier than the first, her body knowing what to expect this time. Sarah continued to manage the household and care for young Kade with impressive efficiency. And when their daughter was born in June of 1880, it was Sarah who guided Dr. Harrison through the birth with calm instructions, having learned from the first experience. They named her Rose, after Sarah's mother, and she was a quieter baby than her brother had been, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes. Young Kade, now 15 months old, was fascinated by his little sister, constantly wanting to touch her gently under Sarah's patient supervision. Watching Sarah manage 2 children while blind should have been impossible, but she made it look natural. She kept them close, used a sling to carry Rose while keeping one hand free for Kade Jr., organized her days with meticulous care. And Kade supported her at every turn, taking over when she needed rest, helping with the children in the evenings and on Sundays. "We make a good team," Sarah said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, young Kade playing at their feet while Rose dozed in Sarah's arms. "I never imagined life could be this full." "Neither did I," Kade admitted. He described the sunset to her, the way he always did, painting the colors and the clouds with words. "The sky is turning gold now, fading to orange at the horizon. There are streaks of pink and purple higher up, and the mountains in the distance are going dark against the light." "Beautiful," Sarah murmured. "Thank you for being my eyes, Kade. Thank you for being my heart." The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Young Kade grew into a sturdy, serious boy who inherited his mother's determination and his father's quiet strength. Rose was more outgoing, a bright spark of energy who chattered constantly, describing everything she saw to her mother with the unself-conscious helpfulness of childhood. In 1883, Sarah gave birth to another son, Samuel, and in 1885, a second daughter, Grace. The house rang with children's laughter, with the chaos of a growing family. Kade expanded the ranch further, hiring more help, building it into one of the more prosperous spreads in the region. Sarah became a fixture in the community, known not as the blind woman but as Kade Fletcher's capable wife, the mother who raised 4 children with grace and strength. She started teaching other women in the area how to can vegetables, how to manage household accounts, sharing the skills she had learned. And gradually, the townspeople stopped seeing her blindness first and saw Sarah instead. One afternoon in the summer of 1886, Kade found Sarah sitting on the porch steps, her face tilted up toward the sun. The children were playing in the yard under the watchful eye of Billy, who had proven to be not just a capable ranch hand but a trusted friend. Kade sat down beside his wife, taking her hand in his. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," Sarah said softly. 8 years ago, I stepped off a stage in Skidoo, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. I had no idea if you would really accept me, if this gamble would pay off. And now look at us. 4 beautiful children, a prosperous ranch, a life I could never have imagined. I was terrified too, Kade confessed. Not of your blindness, but of failing you, of not being the husband you deserved. You have been everything I needed and more. Sarah squeezed his hand. You see me, Kade, truly see me. Not as a disability, not as a burden, but as Sarah. As your wife, your partner, the mother of your children. That is the greatest gift you could have given me. I love you, Kade said simply. I have loved you since the moment you stepped off that stage with your chin up and your courage showing. I will love you until I draw my last breath. And I love you. You taught me that I could be loved, that I was worthy of love. You gave me a life instead of just an existence. As the sun set over the California desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange and purple, the Fletcher family gathered on the porch. Young Kade, now 7, read aloud from a book while his mother listened with a smile. Rose, 5, sat on her father's lap, chattering about the lizard she had found that afternoon. 3-year-old Samuel played with wooden blocks at their feet, and baby Grace dozed in her mother's arms. It was an ordinary moment, unremarkable in its domesticity, but it was everything. This was the life they had built together, a life founded on love and trust, and the courage to see beyond appearances. Kade looked at Sarah, at the woman who had crossed California, blind and alone, to marry a stranger, who had faced down doubt and fear and impossibility with unwavering strength, and felt his heart swell with gratitude. The years continued to pass in a tapestry of ordinary moments and extraordinary love. Young Kade grew into a thoughtful young man who took after his father in his love of the land, learning to manage the ranch with the same dedication Kade himself had shown. Rose became a teacher, inspired by her mother's example, determined to help other children who faced challenges the world told them were insurmountable. Samuel inherited his mother's quick mind and his father's work ethic, eventually studying law in San Francisco and returning to Skidoo to serve the community. And Grace, the baby, grew into a fierce advocate for those society overlooked, founding a school for blind children in Los Angeles that bore her mother's name. But those triumphs were still in the future. For now, in this moment in 1886, the Fletcher family simply was. Together, complete, a testament to the power of love to transcend what the world deemed impossible. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars emerged, Kade carried his youngest children inside while Sarah followed, her hand on young Kade's shoulder as he guided her. The evening routine unfolded with practiced ease, children tucked into beds, lamps extinguished, the house settling into peaceful quiet. In their own bedroom, Kade and Sarah prepared for sleep with the comfortable familiarity of long marriage. As they lay together in the darkness, Sarah's head resting on Kade's chest, his arms around her, they talked quietly about the future. About the ranch's prospects, about the children's education, about the life they were building not just for themselves but for generations to come. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Marrying a blind woman, taking on all the extra challenges that come with it." Kade was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "I regret that you face challenges that make your life harder than it needs to be. I regret that the world often judges you before knowing you, but regret marrying you? Never. Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Fletcher. You and these children we made together." "I feel the same," Sarah whispered. "Every challenge has been worth it to have this life with you." They made love then, slow and sweet, a reaffirmation of vows spoken 8 years before. And afterward, as Sarah drifted into sleep, Kade lay awake, watching the play of moonlight across her face, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the sweep of her lashes, the small smile that lingered on her lips even in sleep. He had learned to love her without ever truly seeing her face, he realized. Oh, he knew what she looked like, could describe every feature in detail. But that was not how he saw her. He saw her through her laughter, her courage, her unwavering strength. He saw her in the way she mothered their children, in the competence with which she managed their home, in the love she showed him every day through 1,000 small acts of care and devotion. Physical sight was such a limited thing, he had come to understand. What he saw with his eyes was just surface, just appearance. But what he saw with his heart, the essence of who Sarah truly was, that was real and profound and eternal. And Sarah, who could not see his face at all, knew him better than anyone ever had. She knew the tone of his voice that meant he was troubled, the particular way he sighed when he was content, the rhythm of his breathing when he slept. She knew the calluses on his hands, the scar on his shoulder from a bull's horn, the way his jaw tightened when he was angry. She knew his heart, his fears, his dreams, all the hidden parts he had never shared with another living soul. They had learned to see each other in ways that transcended physical sight, and in doing so had built something rare and precious. A love that was deeper than appearance, stronger than circumstance, enduring beyond all the challenges life threw at them. The autumn of 1886 brought unexpected challenges when a drought settled over the region, testing the resilience Kade and Sarah had built. Water grew scarce, and Kade spent long days riding the property, managing the herd, ensuring the creek that fed their land continued to flow. Sarah took over more of the daily ranch operations, coordinating the hands, managing supplies, all while caring for 4 young children. It was during this difficult time that Sarah truly proved her worth to any remaining doubters in the community. When Tom Wilson's wife Martha fell ill with pneumonia, Sarah organized the neighboring women to help care for the Wilson children and manage their household. She arranged meal deliveries, coordinated schedules, all with an efficiency that impressed everyone involved. "I do not know how you manage it all," Mrs. Henderson from town said one afternoon, delivering supplies Sarah had organized. 4 children of your own, a ranch to help run, and now coordinating care for the Wilsons, and doing it all without sight. "The lack of sight is merely an inconvenience," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "It does not affect my ability to think, to plan, to care about my neighbors. Martha was there for me when I needed her. Of course I will be there for her now." When the drought finally broke in November, bringing blessed rain that turned the desert briefly green, the community celebrated. And Kade took Sarah into town for a rare dinner at the hotel restaurant, a treat they had not indulged in since before the children were born. "You were magnificent during the drought," Kade told her as they sat over steak and potatoes. "The way you managed everything, kept the household running, helped the Wilsons. I was in awe." "We are partners," Sarah reminded him. When one of us is overwhelmed, the other steps up. That is what marriage means. Still, you could have used the drought as an excuse to do less. Instead, you did more. That says everything about who you are. Sarah reached across the table, finding his hand unerringly. I learned from the best. You have shown me every day what it means to face challenges head-on, to work hard, to care for those around you. I am simply following your example. That night, as they rode back to the ranch under a sky brilliant with stars, Kade described the constellations to Sarah as he had done countless times before. But this time, she interrupted him. "Kade, I need to tell you something. I am pregnant again." Kade nearly dropped the reins. "Truly. But Grace is only 18 months old." "I know. And I am exhausted at the thought of another infant, but I am also thrilled." She laughed softly. "We are building quite the family, are we not?" "We are indeed." Kade pulled her close, one arm around her shoulders as he managed the reins with the other. "Are you happy about it?" "Very happy. Tired but happy. You, the same. Though I confess I worry about you. 5 children is a lot, Sarah, especially managing them all while blind." "I managed 4. "I will manage 5. Her voice was confident, but Kade heard the thread of uncertainty beneath it. "We will manage 5, he corrected gently. "Together. Always together." Their 5th child, a son they named David, was born in June of 1887. His arrival brought new chaos to an already busy household, but it also brought joy. The older children doted on their baby brother, and Sarah navigated motherhood to 5 with the same determined grace she brought to everything. But the years were taking their toll. Sarah was 32 now, and the constant work of managing a large family, a ranch, and the limitations of her blindness had aged her. Kade saw it in the lines around her eyes, the weariness in her movements at the end of long days. He insisted on hiring help for the household, a young woman named Clara who came in daily to assist with the children and the heavier housework. "I do not need help," Sarah protested, though her tone lacked conviction. "You have proven you do not need help 1,000 times over," Kade said firmly. "But accepting help does not make you weak. It makes you wise. Let Clara handle some of the burden so you can enjoy our children instead of just surviving their childhoods." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed, and to her surprise, she found that having help did make a difference. With Clara managing the laundry and some of the cooking, Sarah had more time to spend teaching the children, reading to them, playing with them. The tension that had been building in her shoulders eased, and her smiles came more readily. The late 1880s brought prosperity to the Fletcher ranch. Kade's careful management and hard work paid off, and they became one of the more successful operations in the region. He was approached by other ranchers seeking advice, by young men wanting to learn the trade. And Sarah became known as the woman to consult for household management, for raising children, for building a life in the harsh desert environment. In 1889, as young Kade prepared to turn 10, the family gathered for a birthday celebration that also marked a milestone. It had been 11 years since Sarah had arrived in Skidoo, 11 years since she and Kade had married. As Kade watched his wife cut the birthday cake with practiced precision, surrounded by their 5 children and a house full of friends and neighbors, he marveled at the life they had built. After the guests had left and the children were in bed, Kade and Sarah sat on the porch together as they had done countless times before. The night was cool, the stars brilliant overhead. 11 years, Sarah said softly. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, other times like it just began." "I know what you mean." Kade took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Do you remember the day you arrived? You were so brave, stepping off that stage into the unknown." "I was terrified," Sarah confessed, "but the moment I heard your voice, something in me settled. I knew somehow that I had made the right choice." I knew it too, though it took me a bit longer to admit it to myself. Kade raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You have given me everything, Sarah. A family, a home, a purpose beyond just survival. I hope you know how much I love you. I do know. You show me every day in 1,000 different ways. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. And I love you just as much. You gave me a life, Kade, a real life full of purpose and love and belonging. You saw past my blindness to the person I am. That is a gift beyond measure. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant cry of a coyote, the rustle of wind through sage. These were the moments Kade treasured most, the quiet times when it was just the two of them, together in the darkness that Sarah always inhabited but which felt companionable rather than lonely. What do you think the future holds? Sarah asked eventually. Young Kade will be a man before we know it. They all will. I think they will do remarkable things, Kade said. Look at what they have learned from you. Courage, determination, the refusal to let obstacles define them. They will take those lessons and build their own lives, make their own marks on the world. And what about us? When the children are grown and gone, then it will be just us again, like it was in the beginning. And I will sit on this porch with you every evening and describe the sunset, and we will talk about our grandchildren, and we will grow old together. Kade smiled, though he knew she could not see it. That sounds like a fine future to me as well. The 1890s brought change to Skidoo and the surrounding region. The mining that had sustained the town began to slow, and some families moved away seeking better prospects elsewhere. But the Fletcher Ranch remained constant, a fixture in the community. Kade and Sarah's children grew and thrived, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Young Kade, at 12, was already working the ranch alongside his father, showing a natural talent for animal husbandry and land management. Rose, 10, had declared her intention to become a teacher and spent hours practicing her lessons on her younger siblings. Samuel, 7, was the family scholar, always with his nose in a book, asking questions that challenged even his parents' knowledge. Grace, 5, was the family's little mother, always caring for baby David, who at 3 was a whirlwind of energy and mischief. One evening in the spring of 1892, as Sarah was putting David to bed, the little boy asked a question that stopped her in her tracks. "Mama, why cannot you see?" Sarah had known this question would come eventually, but it still caught her off guard. She sat on the edge of David's bed, considering her answer carefully. "When I was 7 years old, I got very sick with something called scarlet fever," she explained. "The fever hurt my eyes and took away my sight, so I cannot see the way you can. But I can feel and hear and smell and taste. I experience the world differently, but I still experience it fully." "Does it make you sad?" "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "I wish I could see your face, David. I wish I could see all of your faces and the ranch and the beautiful sunsets your father describes. But being blind has also taught me things. It has taught me to pay attention in different ways, to value what truly matters. And it brought me to your father, which brought me all of you. So no, it does not make me sad. Not anymore." David was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then, with the blunt honesty of childhood, he said, "I think you are the best mama in the whole world, even if you cannot see." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she pulled her youngest son into a fierce hug. "Thank you, my darling boy. That means more than you know." Later, when she told Kade about the conversation, he held her as she cried, releasing years of accumulated grief for the sight she had lost, the things she would never see. But they were not tears of bitterness or regret. They were tears of acceptance, of gratitude for the life she had despite the loss. "You are the best mother," Kade said firmly. "David is right, and you are the best wife, the best partner, the best woman I have ever known. Even though I cannot see, especially because you cannot see. You have faced challenges that would break most people, and you have not just survived them but thrived. You have built a life that is full and rich and beautiful. That takes a strength most people do not possess." As the years continued to pass, the Fletcher children grew into remarkable young adults. Young Kade, at 16, was running much of the ranch operation, allowing his father more time with the younger children. Rose graduated from the local school at the top of her class and began teaching in the schoolhouse. Samuel won a scholarship to attend university in San Francisco, making both his parents weep with pride. Grace and David, still at home, kept the household lively. Grace inherited her mother's organizational skills and helped manage the household with increasing competence. David, the baby, proved to be the most adventurous of the five, always exploring, always asking questions, always pushing boundaries in ways that simultaneously delighted and terrified his parents. In 1896, on their 18th wedding anniversary, Kade took Sarah on a trip to San Francisco, their first time away from the ranch and children in all the years of their marriage. Young Kade, now 18 and fully capable, managed the ranch with Rose and Clara's help. The week in the city was a revelation, a reminder that they were not just parents and ranchers but husband and wife, partners who had chosen each other. They walked the streets of San Francisco arm in arm, Kade describing the bustling city in vivid detail. They attended the theater, where Kade whispered descriptions of the sets and costumes while Sarah listened to the dialogue and music. They dined in fine restaurants and stayed in a hotel with actual luxuries like hot running water and electric lights. "This is wonderful," Sarah said one evening as they prepared for bed in their hotel room. "But I confess I miss our children. I miss the ranch." "I do too," Kade admitted. "But it is good to remember that we are more than just parents." "We are us, Sarah and Kade, the two people who fell in love through letters and built a life together. We did build a good life, did we not? The best life. With you, I found everything I was looking for without even knowing I was searching. A home, a family, a purpose. Love that runs so deep I cannot imagine existing without it." Sarah crossed to where Kade stood by the window, her hand unerringly finding his. "Describe the city to me one more time. I want to remember this moment." So Kade described the lights of San Francisco spreading out below them, the glow of gas lamps and electric bulbs, the movement of people and carriages in the streets. He described the bay in the distance, the lights of ships at anchor, the stars above fighting to be seen through the city's glow. And Sarah listened, building the picture in her mind, her head resting against Kade's chest, his arms around her. After all these years, they still fit together perfectly, two halves of a whole that had been searching for each other without knowing it. When they returned to the ranch, they found everything running smoothly, the children thriving, the operation continuing without interruption. It was proof that they had succeeded in raising capable, independent children, which should have pleased them. And it did, though Kade and Sarah both felt the bittersweet knowledge that their time as active parents was drawing to a close. Young Kade married in 1898, a sweet girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was held at the Fletcher Ranch, with the whole community in attendance. Sarah cried as her eldest son spoke his vows, remembering the tiny infant she had held in her arms 19 years before, marveling at the man he had become. Rose followed her brother's example, marrying a young teacher she had met at a conference in Los Angeles. Her wedding in 1899 was equally joyous. And Sarah felt pride mixed with sadness as another child left the family home to build their own life. Samuel graduated from law school and opened a practice in Skidoo, determined to serve the community that had raised him. Grace, at 17, was courting a young rancher, much to her parents' mixed feelings. And David, now 12, was already talking about traveling the world, exploring all the places his mother had described from her imagination. "They are leaving us," Sarah said one night in 1900 as she and Kade lay together in their now much quieter house. "One by one, they are building their own lives. Soon it will just be David, and then even he will go." "That is what we raised them for," Kade reminded her gently. "To be independent, to build their own dreams. We did our job well. I know, but I will miss them. So will I, but we will have grandchildren to spoil soon enough. Young Kade and Emma are expecting already, did you hear?" Sarah sat up in surprise. "They are. When did you learn this?" "Emma told me yesterday when I stopped by their place. They are waiting to tell everyone else, but she gave me permission to share with you." Kade pulled Sarah back down into his arms. "We are going to be grandparents, Sarah. Can you believe it? It seems impossible. Was it not just yesterday that we were getting married? How did we get old enough to have grandchildren?" "We are not old," Kade protested. "You are 45, I am 48. We have years ahead of us yet." "Good, because I am not finished living with you, Kade Fletcher. Not by a long shot." Their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas, was born in the spring of 1901. When young Kade brought the baby to meet his grandparents, Sarah held the infant with practiced ease, her hands learning his features the way she had learned her own children's. "He is beautiful," she pronounced. "He has your nose, Kade Jr., and I think Emma's chin." Watching Sarah with their grandchild, Kade felt his heart swell with love so intense it was almost painful. This woman, who had come to him blind and unknown, had given him not just a life but a legacy. 5 children, now a grandchild, a family that spread out from their love like ripples on water. More grandchildren followed. Rose had twin girls in 1902. Samuel married and had a son in 1903. Grace wed her rancher and gave birth to a daughter in 1904. And David, their baby, went off to university in 1905, the last child to leave the family home. For the first time in over 20 years, Kade and Sarah were alone in the house. The silence was strange, almost uncomfortable at first. But gradually, they rediscovered the rhythms of just the two of them, the companionship they had built in those early years before children had filled their lives. Kade scaled back his work on the ranch, hiring more help, spending more time with Sarah. They took long walks together in the cool evenings, Kade describing the land they had built their life on. They sat on the porch for hours, talking or simply existing together in comfortable silence. They made love with the ease of long practice, bodies that knew each other intimately after more than a quarter century together. "I am 60 years old today," Sarah announced on a bright morning in March of 1915. "That seems impossible." "You do not look 60, Kade said gallantly, though the truth was that time had left its marks. Sarah's hair was more gray than honey now, and lines creased her face. But to Kade, she was as beautiful as the day she had stepped off that stage in Skidoo, chin lifted with courage and hope. "How would you know? You are biased." But Sarah smiled as she said it, pleased by the compliment. They celebrated her birthday quietly, just the two of them and the grandchildren who lived nearby. The house filled with noise and laughter, the sound of children playing, the warmth of family. And when everyone had gone home and silence returned, Kade and Sarah sat on their porch, watching the sun set over the desert they had called home for nearly 4 decades. "You have any regrets?" Kade asked, a question he had posed before but felt compelled to ask again as they both aged. "None," Sarah said firmly. Not a single one. This life we have built, this family, this love between us, it has been everything I could have hoped for and more. What about you? My only regret is that our time is growing shorter. I want 100 more years with you, Sarah. 1,000. We will have to settle for whatever time we are given, but we will make it count, every single day. They did make it count. The years that followed were slower, quieter, but no less full. Kade and Sarah became fixtures in their community, the couple who had proven that love could transcend any obstacle. They were consulted on matters of marriage, of child rearing, of business. Their advice was sought and valued. In 1920, they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary. All 5 of their children came home for the occasion, along with 14 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. The ranch overflowed with family, with love, with the legacy of the life Kade and Sarah had built together. As Kade looked around at the celebration, at the faces of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, he was overcome with emotion. All of this had started with a letter, with a blind woman's courage and a lonely cowboy's willingness to take a chance. From those fragile beginnings, this vast family had grown. That night, after everyone had finally gone to bed, Kade and Sarah sat on their porch one more time. Sarah's health had been declining, a slow but steady fade that worried Kade deeply. But tonight she seemed peaceful, content. "Thank you," Sarah said softly. "For what? For seeing me. For loving me despite my blindness, or perhaps because it taught me to see the world differently. For building this life with me, for giving me a family, a home, a purpose. For 42 years of partnership and love. For everything, Kade. Thank you for everything." Kade's throat was too tight to speak. He pulled Sarah close, holding her as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars he had described to her thousands of times over the decades. He knew, with a certainty that chilled his bones, that their time was growing very short. Sarah's body was wearing out, the years of hard work and 5 pregnancies and managing life without sight finally taking their toll. "I love you," he managed finally. "I have loved you since the moment I read your first letter. I will love you beyond my last breath. And I love you. You gave me the world, Kade Fletcher. You gave me everything." Sarah passed peacefully in her sleep 3 weeks later, Kade holding her hand as the sun rose over the California desert. She was 65 years old, and she left behind a husband, 5 children, 14 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren, all of whom mourned her deeply. The funeral was the largest Skidoo had ever seen. People came from across the county to pay their respects to the woman who had changed so many minds about what was possible, who had lived a full and remarkable life, despite her blindness. The stories shared that day painted a picture of Sarah's impact, the lives she had touched, the example she had set. But it was Kade's eulogy that brought the entire gathering to tears. He stood at the front of the small church, his voice breaking with grief, and spoke of the woman he had loved for 42 years. "Sarah came to me blind, a mail-order bride willing to risk everything for a chance at a new life. I thought I was taking a chance on her, but the truth is she was taking the far greater risk. She trusted me to see her as more than her disability, to value her for who she was inside. And from that trust, from that leap of faith, we built a life that was richer and fuller than I could have imagined. She taught me what it means to truly see someone, to look beyond the surface to the heart beneath. She showed me that strength comes in many forms, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear win. She gave me a family, a home, a reason to wake up grateful every single day. I loved her from the beginning, and I will love her until I die. And if there is a heaven, I know she is there, able to see at last all the beauty she experienced through touch and sound and description. Until we meet again, my darling Sarah, rest peacefully. You earned it. Kade lived another 5 years after Sarah's death. Years he filled with his children and grandchildren, with maintaining the ranch, with the routines that kept him connected to the life they had built together. But everyone could see that part of him had died with Sarah, that he was simply marking time until he could join her. He died in his sleep in 1925, at the age of 73. His children found him in the bed he had shared with Sarah for over 4 decades, a peaceful smile on his face, their wedding photograph clutched in his hand. He was buried beside Sarah on a hill overlooking the ranch, the land they had built together from nothing. The double headstone reads simply, Kade and Sarah Fletcher, partners in life, partners in love, together forever. The ranch remained in the Fletcher family for generations, passed down through young Kade and his descendants. The story of Sarah and Kade became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of what love can accomplish. The model of the ranch that Kade had given Sarah on their 2nd anniversary was preserved as a family treasure, a symbol of how love finds ways to communicate that transcend the physical senses. And every year on their wedding anniversary, the Fletcher descendants gathered at those 2 graves on the hill, bringing flowers and sharing stories, keeping alive the memory of a blind mail-order bride and the cowboy who learned to love her not despite her blindness, but for all that she was, seeing her with a vision that went far deeper than physical sight. Their love story became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of seeing with the heart instead of the eyes, of valuing what truly matters, of building a life on respect and partnership and genuine love. In a world that often judges on appearances, Kade and Sarah's story remained a reminder that the deepest connections are forged not through what we see on the surface, but through what we discover when we look beyond it. The ranch still stands, over a century after Sarah first arrived in Skidoo. The house has been expanded and modernized, but the core that Kade built remains. And on quiet evenings when the desert wind blows just right, some say you can still feel them there, sitting on that porch, Kade describing the sunset in vivid detail while Sarah listens with complete attention, building the picture in her mind. 2 souls intertwined for eternity, together in the home they built, the life they created, the love that transcended everything.